Every night you lie down, close your eyes, and at some point, you're gone. Not dead. Not unconscious in a dramatic way. Just gone. One moment you're aware of the ceiling, your pillow, the sound outside. The next moment, it's 7 a.m. And here's the thing nobody talks about. You have no memory of the exact moment it happened. Not last night. Not the night before. Not ever, in your entire life. You've fallen asleep thousands of times, and you cannot recall a single one. That sounds like a small thing until you actually sit with it. You lose consciousness every single night. You hand over control of your entire mind and body to a process you don't understand, can't feel happening, and will never remember experiencing. So what's actually going on? Let's start with what your brain is doing in the moments before you fall asleep. Most people assume sleep is something that happens to you, like flipping a switch, awake 1 second, asleep the next. It's not. Sleep is a process, and it begins before you're even aware it's happening. About 10 to 20 minutes before you actually lose consciousness, your brain starts quietly shifting gears. Your core body temperature begins to drop. Your heart rate slows. The neurons responsible for keeping you alert start to pull back. Like workers leaving an office at the end of the day, one by one, lights going off in different rooms. This is called the hypnagogic state, and it's one of the strangest things that happens to a human being. In the hypnagogic state, your brain is no longer fully awake, but it's not asleep either. It exists in a kind of no man's land between two different modes of consciousness, and in that in-between space, weird things happen. You might see shapes, colors, faces you've never seen before. Flashes of scenes that feel like memories but aren't. You might hear sounds, your name being called, music, a voice saying something that makes no sense. You might feel like you're falling, which is so common it has a name, the Hypnic Jerk. That sudden full-body spasm that jolts you awake right as you're drifting off. For thousands of years, people didn't know what to make of hypnic jerks. Some thought it was the soul briefly leaving the body. Others thought it was a sign of illness. The actual explanation is stranger than either of those. One theory is that the hypnic jerk is an evolutionary leftover. Our primate ancestors slept in trees, and as they drifted off, their muscles would relax. If a sleeping primate relaxed too completely, it would fall. So the brain developed a failsafe. As the body began to go limp, the brain would fire off a sudden muscle contraction, a reset, to catch itself. We don't sleep in trees anymore, but the reflex is still there, firing off every time you relax deeply enough to trigger it. Your body is still, on some level, trying to catch itself from a fall that isn't happening. But here's the part that connects back to the original question. Even as all of this is occurring, the shapes, the sounds, the hypnic jerk, you are not forming clear memories of any of it, and that's intentional. The brain does something remarkable during the transition into sleep. It begins suppressing memory consolidation before you're fully unconscious. The hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for encoding new memories, starts to go offline early, not all at once. Gradually, like a camera slowly losing power, by the time your brain is actually crossing the threshold into sleep, the memory camera is already off. So the experience of falling asleep, whatever you feel, see, or hear in those final moments, is never recorded. It's not that you forget it later, it's that it was never stored in the first place. You are conscious during those final moments, conscious enough to experience things, but the machinery that would allow you to remember experiencing them has already shut down. You were there, and you were already gone. This creates something philosophers and neuroscientists have struggled with for decades. If consciousness requires memory to exist, if an experience only happened to you because you can remember it, then what do we make of the moments before sleep? Were you conscious if you can't remember being conscious? There's no clean answer. But the implications go deeper than sleep, because the same thing happens when you go under anesthesia, when you have a high fever, in certain states of meditation, in the early stages of certain neurological conditions. There are places your brain can go where it is, by some definitions, experiencing things, but where the recording mechanism is switched off. What happens in those gaps is genuinely unknown. Now let's talk about something even stranger. Most people don't realize that you don't fall asleep once per night. You fall asleep multiple times. Sleep happens in cycles, roughly 90 minutes each. In a full night, you'll cycle through 4 to 6 of them. And between each cycle, you actually surface, briefly. Not enough to wake up, usually, but enough that if something significant happened, a loud noise, someone moving, you'd stir, and then you fall asleep again. Each of those transitions is another moment you'll never remember, another gap in your conscious experience that you'll seamlessly paper over come morning. You experience your night as one continuous stretch of unconsciousness, but it's not. It's a series of returns and departures, none of which leave a trace. Here's something researchers discovered that should genuinely unsettle you. People who are woken up during certain sleep stages, specifically the non-REM stages, frequently report that they weren't asleep, even though they clearly were. Their brain activity, their breathing, their heart rate, everything shows they were deeply asleep. But when you wake them, they say, "I was just lying here thinking. I wasn't asleep." This means the brain, even during sleep, sometimes generates the subjective experience of being awake. You've almost certainly experienced this yourself. The feeling of lying in bed, thinking you're still awake, only to realize you were actually asleep, that you had been for some time. At what point did one state become the other? You don't know, because the border between them was invisible from the inside. There's a deeper truth buried in all of this. We tend to think of consciousness as something we either have or don't have, on or off, awake or asleep. But what sleep shows us is that consciousness is not a light switch. It's a dial, and it turns slowly in both directions with a long gray zone in between where the normal rules stop applying. In that gray zone, you can be aware without being able to record awareness. You can experience without being able to remember experiencing. You can be, in some meaningful sense, somewhere between being and not being. Every night you cross that zone twice, once going in, once coming back out. And every morning you have no idea how you got there. The researchers who study sleep onset, the actual moment of falling asleep, describe it as one of the hardest things in neuroscience to study, because the only person who could tell you what it feels like to cross that line is the person crossing it. And by the time they've crossed it, they can no longer report anything. It's like trying to observe the moment water freezes from inside the water. The best they've managed are indirect measures, EEG readings, eye movement patterns, muscle tone sensors, all of them drawing a picture of what the brain is doing from the outside while the person inside goes somewhere we can't follow. And the picture they draw is this: the self, the sense of being a specific person with a specific life and specific thoughts, starts to dissolve long before the brain is technically asleep. Identity loosens, time gets fuzzy, the boundary between what's real and what's imagined softens, and then it's gone, and then it's morning. So the next time you're lying in bed, waiting to fall asleep, pay attention. Not to try to catch the moment. You won't. No one ever has. But notice the edges of it. The way thoughts start to feel less like your thoughts and more like things happening near you. The way the room gets both more real and less important at the same time. The way a sound you'd normally register just floats past without attaching to anything. That's the boundary. You're standing right at it, and somewhere in the next few minutes, without knowing when, without choosing to, without any fanfare at all, you'll step across it like you have every night of your life, and like every other time, you won't remember a thing.